6:30. So good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the February 5th Committee of the Whole meeting. Sherry, could you please call the roll?
Yeah. Councilmember Garza,
Here.
Councilmember Hussein,
Here.
Councilmember Cost,
Here.
Councilmember Pelly Van Elbu,
Present.
Councilmember Spatafor,
Present.
Councilmember Brown,
Present.
Councilmember Jackson,
Present.
and Councilmember Carter. Here. All members present.
Okay. We are to public comment on agenda items. I'm not seeing anybody here from the public, but if anybody shows up, they will have up to 3 minutes. I don't see anybody here. I guess I'll offer that up one more time. Nobody here for public comment? Okay, moving on. We are to presentations. First, we have a human resources training presentation on workplace harassment and workplace violence. Would that be Elizabeth, or who's going to be presenting today?
Yes, so I'll do an
Oh,
intro.
okay,
I
thank
have
you.
Courtney Roberts here. She is our Labor Relations Administrator. Also Kyla Moore is here, our Deputy Director. So Courtney will be presenting and we will all be fielding questions if necessary.
Okay, thank you. Floor is yours.
Okay, so you should have a packet of the PowerPoint slides. And if you would like to, you can just jot down any questions that you may have, and we'll go over those at the end, after the review. So sexual harassment and non-discrimination policy complaint procedures. What is sexual harassment? Sexual harassment is defined as unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, or other verbal, written, or physical conduct, when such conduct is made either explicitly or implicitly. Submission to or rejection of such conduct by an individual is used as a basis for employment decisions. The conduct interferes with the individual's work performance and or to create an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. Some examples of sexual harassment are derogatory comments, slurs based on sex, sexual jokes, remarks about body parts, sexual gestures, touching, hugging, or unwelcome sexual advances. Harassment based upon a person's membership is in a protected class is also prohibited. What is illegal employment discrimination? An illegal employment decision, policy, or practice that is based upon a person's religious, race, color, national origin, gender, gender identity or expression, sexual orientation, age, marital status, height, weight, arrest record, disability, genetic information, or other legally protected class. Reporting sexual harassment and illegal employment discrimination. Employees and supervisors have an obligation to report alleged conduct as soon as possible. It is the city's intent to handle complaints as confidentially as possible. Please know that in order to fully investigate matters, questioning witnesses, and the person's use of the behavior is necessary. Once a sexual harassment complaint is received, the investigation will be started. If during the investigation it is determined that an employee has willingly provided false information, disciplinary action may be taken against the individual. Findings of the investigation are confidential. However, the employee who files a complaint will be notified that the issue has been resolved. Retaliation. The city prohibits any form of retaliation against an employee for filing a complaint or assisting in an investigation. If after filing a complaint or assisting in an investigation, an employee believes there are additional allegations of illegal discrimination or retaliation, it must be reported immediately. Workplace violence prevention policy. What is workplace violence? Workplace violence is any act, gesture, or statement that is interpreted by any employee as threatening or intimidating. Any act or omission that is physically damaging to employees or members of the public while in the workplace, on city property, or that is related to city business or policy, regardless of the locations of such acts. Some examples of workplace violence are physical or verbal threats, assaults, battery, harassment, stalking, and other forms of intimidation, actual or implied. Reporting workplace violence. So 911 is the first contact that you will call if you needed to. Your supervisor or DC should be reported to the Department of Human Resources. All supervisors should immediately report violent or threatening behavior to the Department of Human Resources after action necessary to ensure safety. Assessment of reported behavior or the resolution. The director of human resources or designee will immediately initiate an appropriate process to investigate all complaints. The director or designee will confer with other appropriate city officials that may include Lansing Police Department personnel to complete the investigation. The director of HR or designee, the Lansing Police Department, if involved, and the appropriate department director will consider all information gathered in the investigation in determining a resolution. Retaliation, false accusations. This prohibits any form of retaliation against an employee for filing a legitimate complaint under this policy or for assisting in an investigation. If after investigation, the city determines that an employee has intentionally made a false accusation or knowingly provided false information, disciplinary action up to and including discharge will be administered. Any disciplinary action rendered is pursuant to city policies, procedures, and CBAs. Education and training, and then employee assistance. If found during or after investigation that the city of Lansing employee or department requires professional counseling services, the city shall consult with the employee assistant program provider. Employee may also contact the employee assistant program provider for services independently. And as a general reminder, it is the city's responsibility to provide a safe working environment for all the employees by maintaining a zero tolerance violence policy. If any city employee has questions or concerns or related to this policy, please contact the Department of Human Resources.
So before we start the video, does anybody have questions regarding the bullet points on the policy for either sexual harassment or workplace violence policy?
I guess I have one question. So regarding the zero tolerance, has that been implemented now? Because I remember there was a issue back with Scott Sanford working here. And he made some accusations that were considered, I think that would have fallen under that scope. And nothing was really done about it.
I'm not going to get into specifics of situations, because it'd be inappropriate in a public setting. But I will tell you that our policy is zero tolerance. That does not automatically mean that like somebody is terminated. That means that prompt remedial action will occur if there's a violation of a policy or a GR in accordance with the collective bargaining agreements.
Okay.
Are there more questions? Happy to take any hypotheticals or answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions?
It's a new template you guys use this year?
This is the same one from last year.
Oh, that looks nice.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Okay, seeing no further questions.
All right, so we have a lovely video. I know that at times this may seem like a little exaggerated, but I would take heed to it because these are things that actually happen in the workplace across our nation. So I know at times it may seem just like a little silly, but these are very serious things that happen. Yes.
Can I ask before the video, he brought up a point, but I was wondering based on this training, all the employees get this training, and have we seen more people reporting or less, or is that kind of data collected in your department so we're able to see if we're moving the right direction or not?
I haven't brought data with me today, but I will tell you that our employees are aware of the policy. They receive training as needed. That's something that's on our agenda to make sure that employees get the right training that they need on an annual basis. But that's in the coming year.
Thank you.
Can everybody hear that? Yeah.
Our various workplaces are made up of a wide variety of people performing a wide variety of job tasks. As we interact with others during the course of our work, we will undoubtedly come into contact with people who do not look like us. We will work side by side with people whose culture and beliefs may be different from our own. Our workforce is more diverse than ever. The expression, "it's a small world," is literally true.
That's right. And in order to maximize the unique talents and skills of each individual and contribute to a productive and efficient workplace, we must be able to interact and communicate with each other in a professional and respectful manner.
When employees treat each other with respect and professionalism, a positive workplace culture is created, one with a working environment that is both productive and pleasurable.
And while a vast majority of workers conduct themselves respectfully to their coworkers, it only takes a few disrespectful people conducting themselves in a harassing manner to create a damaging and hostile working environment.
Hey, I need some help setting up a spreadsheet. I'm not sure how to do it, Jake. You wanna go give me a hand?
Hey, Casper, why don't you go and ask one of your own kind, man? What do we look like, free labor or something?
A hostile working environment created by harassing behavior has a very negative impact on workers' morale and productivity.
Yes, no one wants to work in a place where they're harassed, and no one has to. In this program, we will discuss various types of workplace harassment and how this unwelcome behavior affects the workplace.
We will also review what you should do if you're a victim or an observer of disrespectful conduct, as well as how you can avoid having your own behavior interpreted as harassment.
But first, let's talk about what exactly we mean by the term harassment. Unwelcome behavior becomes harassment when a person's conduct is sufficiently severe or pervasive to create a hostile work environment. Harassment creates a hostile work environment when unwelcome comments or conduct based on sex, race, religion, age, mental or physical disability, or other legally protected characteristics unreasonably interfere with an employee's work performance or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment.
Hey Renee, you look pretty hot in those pants.
When we hear the term workplace harassment, most people automatically think of sexual harassment. But as we have seen, sexual harassment is just one type of harassment that takes place in our workplaces. Harassment doesn't have to be sexual in nature to be illegal. Once the harassment rises to the level of creating a hostile work environment, it becomes illegal. It also doesn't matter if the harasser is not a company employee.
Sure has changed since I've been here. Looks like an affirmative action program in here.
Vendors, contractors, visitors, or others who engage in offensive behavior can also be guilty of workplace harassment.
Keep in mind that the victims of harassing behavior are not limited to those people directly involved.
Don't worry, skinny boy, I'll save you some scratch. You can stand to put a whole lot more on.
Even if the principal parties are not offended by the behavior may be offensive to others and may contribute to creating a hostile workplace.
It is important to understand that not all offensive behavior is automatically harassment. Harassment is behavior that defames or attacks one's reputation, or is behavior that is unjust and repetitive, which makes someone feel humiliated, offended, or intimidated.
You know, Elmore, I get a bit nervous when I'm assigned to work with you. Especially when you folks are on this jihad ready to kill people like me.
Wait a second, Jerry. I'm no terrorist.
Yeah, well, how do I know that? I mean, how can I trust you and your kind? Especially somebody that prefers camel racing to baseball.
Wait, my kind? Camel racing? What are you talking about?
I tell you what, let me hold the ladder and you climb up. I'll feel a lot safer that way.
The example you just witnessed is an all too common form of workplace harassment, one based on race or ethnic group, using racially derogatory words and phrases.
Juan's gonna love this picture I drew of him. He's swimming across the Rio Grande, except this time, he's swimming south.
In addition, demonstrations of a racial or ethnic nature, such as the use of drawings, pictures, or gestures that would offend a particular ethnic group, are also considered harassment.
Oh, I hate putting on sunscreen, but I sunburn so easily with the sun out as bright as it is today. You know, you are so lucky. You're so dark. You probably never have to use sunscreen.
As are comments about a person's skin color or other racial or ethnic traits, characteristics, or stereotypes.
Also, disparaging remarks about an individual's gender, even those that aren't overtly sexual in nature, can be construed as harassment.
How many times do I have to tell you you can't pretend you don't repair work? That's not your fault. You just don't naturally have good mechanical skills.
Okay, Frank, back off. I'm getting it. I'm just not sure where to put those.
Why don't you go clean and organize the supply closet? That seems to lower your speed. Change the tone for you.
Have you two boys already forgotten that I asked you an hour ago to finish up that presentation? If you dim-witted knuckle draggers can't get it done, I'm gonna replace both of you with one woman and save myself a lot of stress.
As our examples illustrated, harassing conduct and behavior can affect both male and females. While some may think this type of behavior is just having fun, it can be offensive to many and has no place in a work environment. Equally offensive are negative comments about another person's religious beliefs.
I just don't understand why you people refuse to see the truth. I'm worried about your soul, Asha.
My soul is just fine, thank you.
No, Asha, it's not. Take this pen. It outlines how wicked your beliefs are and how to make an amends.
No, thank you. I do not need to make any amends for my beliefs, but I do prefer to keep them private.
Asha, your religion is a cult. It's filled with lies and keeps you from seeing what the truth is. If you don't...
By its very nature, religion is a highly personal and emotional subject. Any disparaging remarks about a person's religious beliefs or repeated efforts to share your personal beliefs with others in the workplace can be offensive to many and harassing in nature.
Hey, old timer, let me give you a hand with that. Too bad for you, we don't use the abacus and slide rule like we did 100 years ago when you first started working here. Why don't you just retire? Make it easier on the rest of us.
Negative comments about a coworker's age when referring to people over 40, as well as derogatory references to an employee's mental or physical impairment, are also forms of harassment.
As we have seen, there are many types of workplace harassment. However, sexual harassment is the most publicized and potentially the most damaging form of unwelcome behavior.
Hey, Renee. Well, you're looking pretty hot in those pants. You really make your best features stand out. You know what I mean? Hey, why don't you turn around and walk by again? I can't get enough of your stuff.
Making offensive remarks about a coworker's body parts, clothing, or looks is an example of sexual harassment, which creates a hostile working environment.
Touching a person in a way that makes them feel uncomfortable, such as pinching, rubbing, patting, or intentionally brushing against his or her body, is also an example of sexual harassment, which creates a hostile work environment.
But you have a Facebook page. That's some real nice pictures. Hey, Mary, what do you get when you cross a full-figure gal with a guy with a really big tool?
You know what? I don't know, and I don't care.
I don't know either. What do you say we try it and find out?
Telling lewd jokes, hanging sexually explicit posters, and making sexual gestures can also be considered sexual harassment, especially if the conduct is repeated after it's been made clear that it is unwelcome.
I'd like you to stop.
You're right. I'm sorry. I guess you didn't appreciate that. How about this one? 3 nuns walk into a bar. There's a mule sitting at the end.
Oh my gosh, did you see those pictures from Bailey's wall from her bachelorette party yet? Unbelievable.
Displaying, sending, or forwarding sex-related images, emails, text messages, or similar items can also be considered sexual harassment.
I know, I'm gonna log in right now to Gina. When she sees them, she's gonna absolutely freak.
Be extra vigilant not to participate in any type of inappropriate conduct with computers, phones, and other high-tech gadgets. Always think twice before hitting send.
You better not. Those are really inappropriate for work, and she needs to just wait until she gets home to see them on her own.
Keep in mind that sexual harassment doesn't have to involve touching, talking, or sharing pictures. Something as simple as staring at another employee in a sexually suggestive manner, which is called leering, can bring about complaints of sexual harassment.
A common complaint prevalent among sexual harassment victims is a leveraging of power in exchange for sexual favors.
I know you need the job, Maria, and I don't want to lay you off, so that's why I'd be willing to work with you on some strategic planning.
What do you mean?
My wife is out of town, so go through my plane so we won't be interrupted. We really lay out a plan that puts your skills to the best use. You know, your assets are very impressive. I really hate to see you get laid off.
No, I couldn't do that. I just wouldn't feel comfortable being alone with you when your wife's not home. No.
Make no mistake, anytime a manager, supervisor, or other person of authority over an employee offers advancement, job security, or a positive performance review in exchange for sexual favors, that is considered sexual harassment. It is important to remember that sexual harassment is not limited to a male harassing a female. There have been many cases of sexual harassment involving females in a position of authority harassing a male.
Look, John, we're both attractive, unmarried adults here. I'm too busy to date, but I would be very interested in a simple, friends with benefits arrangement with you.
Look, I'm not really comfortable having this conversation. You are my boss and all.
Before you answer that, maybe take some time and think about it. And it's always a good idea to keep the boss happy.
Reports of same-sex sexual harassment cases have been on the rise in recent years. The gender or sexual orientation of the harasser really doesn't matter. Inappropriate and unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature is considered sexual harassment. It should not be tolerated.
Maria, I'm afraid we're going to have to let you go after all. It's just not working out.
And finally, if a manager or supervisor's unwelcome conduct results in a tangible change in a worker's employment status or benefits, such as a denial of a promotion, a demotion, suspension, or termination, that is also considered harassment. You cannot be punished for refusing an unwelcome sexual advance.
Like I said, it's just not working out.
I told you that made me uncomfortable. I shouldn't be losing my job over this.
We've illustrated a variety of examples of workplace harassment, including those involving race, religion, gender, age, and sexual harassment. These examples serve to help us recognize harassing behaviors when it occurs, but simply recognizing inappropriate conduct is not enough. All workers need to understand what action they need to take when they are a witness to or a victim of unwelcome harassing behavior. Let's look at an example.
Why don't you go clean and organize the supply closet? That seems a little more your speed. Why don't you take a toilet break?
Okay, Frank. I am tired of your sexist comments to me. I am perfectly capable of changing this toner cartridge all by myself. And while I appreciate your willingness to help out, I didn't ask for it. You know, what I am asking for is a more professional working relationship between the two of us. Stop dragging me down because I'm a female.
When you feel harassed or witness harassment, stand up for yourself and your coworkers. Don't ignore it or tolerate it. Instead, explain to the person exhibiting the unwelcome behavior that you're offended by their comments or actions. Express your desire to work in a professional, respectful workplace. It may be hard to believe, but harassers often don't realize their conduct is offensive until somebody spells it out for them.
Wow, Megan. I was just joking around. Maybe I did cross a line. Sorry.
Well, thanks. I like to joke around too, you know, but some things are just not funny.
By speaking out against unwanted conduct, you will be setting an example for others who may be hesitant to speak out. As more people become willing to speak out against inappropriate conduct, it will become more clear to everyone that this type of behavior is unacceptable in the workplace.
Why don't you turn around and walk by again? I can't get enough of your stuff.
Please stop making comments about my body. I don't appreciate it, and I'd like you to stop.
Of course, simply by asking for the conduct to stop will not always work.
Sure has changed since I've been here. Looks like an affirmative action program in here.
Excuse me? I think I can speak for our employees and say, we don't appreciate you talking about us in that way.
Oh, please. Why does everyone have to be so politically correct around here? Why do people like me have to walk on eggshells around people like you?
If the abuse continues after you've challenged the disrespectful behavior, do not allow it to escalate. Do not engage in a verbal or physical confrontation. Instead, stop the communication with the individual, leave the area, and report the situation to your supervisor. As a matter of fact, you have the responsibility of reporting any type of harassment immediately, no matter how the situation evolved, or whether you were the victim or a witness. Hostile work environment harassment can only be controlled if management is aware of such behavior, so the necessary steps can be taken to put a stop to it.
Next, let's discuss steps you can take to prevent your own behavior from being construed as harassment. First of all, you must adopt an attitude that recognizes the differences among all people and be willing to accept the diversity among your co-workers. These differences are evident to viewpoints. Keep in mind that everyone in your workplace has an equal right to work and to do so without unwanted interference from coworkers. Always be aware that individuals interpret things differently and may be offended by comments that are not intended to offend.
You were really articulate today. You should be proud of yourself.
It's always a good idea to think before you act. Imagine if your words and actions were on public display for all to see. Would you be proud of them?
Well, hey, Renee. You're looking pretty hot in those pants. Really shows off your best features.
If your behavior was on center stage and your parents, spouse, children, or clergy were the audience, would your performance be well received?
Why don't you turn around and,
If the answer is no, then you probably shouldn't do it.
I think we're disconnecting from it.
Yeah, it's recognizing her, see, it sees her computer, or see, that's her computer screen right there.
It's just the picture is not showing
Go down to the bottom. See down at the bottom, does it show that it's still open?
Yep, it shows that it's connected. It's just not showing up here.
Is it one of these?
I love
Okay,
technology.
click on it. Click on whichever one it is.
I stopped getting paid to be an ITF force.
Try dragging it. I think it might be thinking it's another monitor instead of.
Close it out and start it up. Okay, now close the program too. See if that helps. Because you're pulling your video through the PowerPoint, so that might be part of it too. Okay, now go back into your PowerPoint. Okay.
Does anybody have any questions while we're getting this loaded up? We're just about to the end of the program.
I know that.
It's recognizing
I know that.
computer. But because it was a video, you know, it might have been. Okay, so now try connecting again. Start from scratch.
did.
just covered that.
So I don't know what to tell you.
Okay, so the last part was just recapping all the things that you learned in the video. So we'll just move on from there and we'll field any questions that you may have with respect to policy, procedure, any questions regarding the video, if anybody has anything.
I think that's the original video I've been seeing since we first got elected. Is there any point in time where we'll be getting a new video?
We already have, and
Oh.
we're vetting it, so.
Okay, cool, nice, thanks.
So
And I think
next
it's a
year
good
you'll-
video, but it's getting a little out of date.
We agree.
Okay.
So you will be seeing the next time around a new video.
Perfect.
Post-COVID, there's no salad bars anymore.
Is there any additional
Yeah, I don't see any
questions?
additional, anybody have any questions? Seeing none, well, we appreciate your presentation tonight, thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving down, we have city attorney, city attorney office training presentation, on elected official training to city council members. Whoever is going to be presenting first, please come on up. Make sure your cell phones are on silent, please.
That was a shot at you.
Good evening, everyone. We've done this every year and try to update it. This is the presentation, what's called legal training. It gives you the main ideas of certain attributes that you should hold. You gonna run it? Yep. Okay. So we'll touch on about 5 areas: fiduciary duty, ethics, human rights, Freedom of Information Act, and the Open Meetings Act. I'll start with the fiduciary duty. A fiduciary duty is the highest standard of loyalty and care and due diligence that a person can have. Some examples, if you're in a trust, the beneficiaries the trustee has a fiduciary duty to the beneficiaries. If you're in probate, the executor has a fiduciary duty to beneficiaries. Go into guardianship, same situation here. You have that fiduciary duty. And that duty is not only explained in the law because it puts you to a higher standard, it's also in our ordinance. And so the definition of fiduciary duty is found in 290.01 of the ordinance. In fact, you have it repeated for you down there. So it's public trust, no personal gain, and the request of not disclosing confidential information. So when you took your oath of office, you were automatically cloaked with the fiduciary duty. And we've listed 2 here on your slide. Fiduciary duty, we've broken it into 2, loyalty and duty of care. But wrapped up in fiduciary duty, if you want to Google something, you'll find out it's good faith, acting in good faith, acting with prudence when you make a decision. If you have conflicts of interest, disclose them. There's a procedure in the charter for disclosing a conflict of interest and voting on it. There's also a provision for coming to the city attorney, and I've had that happen many, many times. So you can just disclose your conflict. Confidentiality, we go into closed sessions. It's a fiduciary duty that you not disclose what's happened in a closed session, because the idea of a closed session is to have conversations about matters that might have financial impact or other impacts on the city. It also requires fiduciary duty that you fairly deal with others. These are all desirable conduct. So on duty of loyalty, I mentioned that you owe to the public an impartial and objective judgment on matters. And I've listed the different types of conflicts that you should avoid, and they're all wrapped up in self-dealing. For example, if you're approving a contract where you're a member of the company that's getting the contract, that's pretty clear, that's self-dealing. Or anything that you get from self-benefit, that's self-dealing, and that's prohibited not only in the ethics ordinance, but it's also prohibited in the charter, and it's also prohibited under the general principle of fiduciary duty. The second one we characterize as the duty of care. That is, in making decisions, you should have a duty to exercise good faith and reasonable care. And you can see the bullets that are on that slide, duty of care. Fulfilling your statutory duties, attending meetings, and remaining knowledgeable of substantive information. I might mention in a couple minutes, one of these areas is actually punishable by forfeiture of office. Desirable conduct is just sort of a guidebook. Be transparent in conflicts. Everyone might have a conflict of some type somewhere. It's not anything that might be particular to you, but if it violates the public trust law, disclose the conflict, or use the provisions in the charter, or disclose to the city attorney. Sometimes council members and board members will actually disclose to the ethics board, so they have that on file. Keep your personal funds and funds related to the city separate. And I know this is difficult for me also. Maintain civility when engaged with colleagues and staff and city employees and the public. That's just an element of discernment. Forfeiture of office is included in the charter. And basically, not everything is forfeiture of office. There may be a provision where you are brought up, or a council or elected official is brought up on charges of a violation by cause and removal for cause, which requires a public hearing. That is found in Charter Section 2-302. And forfeiture of office, you only really find it in one location dealing with attendance of meetings. But council has the ability under the charter to adopt an ordinance providing for forfeiture of office for certain types of activities, whatever you decide. But it's after a public hearing and then a vote. Rights and responsibilities of council members is the last page that's found in the charter in 3-207. So you are legislators, and you have the rights of legislators. You have inquiries of city officers and employees, and receive specific information in response. I know a couple of you council folks have asked us this question most recently. So yes, it's in the charter. The responsibilities shall be to establish the policy of the city and legislative. And in connection with that, the charter prohibits you from giving any direct orders to city employees. So those are the elements of fiduciary duty. A lot of this could get wrapped up in other presentations when we get into human rights ordinance and when we get into ethics. But you are a fiduciary, so congratulations. So next.
Do we have any questions under what, before we get into ethics of the rights and responsibilities of this first section? Fiduciary duties? Seeing none? Okay, sorry.
The sitting area, I'm gonna sit here, is that okay? Ethics comes after fiduciary duties. Ethics is a lot of the codification of the same things that the city attorney was just talking to you about. The city has a little bit more in terms of ethics, and you should also be aware that there's a state law that addresses public servants and how public servants are allowed to contract.
I did read it.
Oh. I've been asked to read a brief statement, and imagine in your mind that this came before the city attorney first started speaking to you. The slideshow you are viewing, and all the information presented by the Office of the City Attorney at this meeting is for the sole purpose of training for the current members of the Lansing City Council. This presentation and its contents do not constitute legal advice. You all just got lawyered. Congratulations.
We're on YouTube, so we have to read.
So, you already have the first one up? I sure do. Oh yeah, I wanted to mention, this doesn't get covered directly in here because this is for council, but there's a state statute that deals specifically with public servants and contracting by public servants. It doesn't get discussed very much with you all because any public servant that gets compensation, you do, for less than or 25 hours a week or less, which you qualify for that as well. You are mostly carved out for the requirements of that statute. There are still some requirements in that statute for declaring any possible conflicts, but fortunately, almost all of that same stuff and a little bit more is in our ethics ordinance. And a lot of what I'm going to be talking to you about is making sure that you are not self-dealing, as the city attorney said, you are not on both sides of a transaction, or that if you are, you declare it properly, and the full council has the opportunity to vote about that. So anyway, the ethics ordinance, the purpose of the ordinance, it identifies the minimum standards of ethical conduct. It establishes penalties for public servants who violate the public trust, and it provides for a process for public servants to identify and resolve ethical issues. The most important purpose is to promote public confidence in the integrity of public servants. You. Us too, but you're elected, so it's a bit of a bigger standard. Violations of the ordinance are a misdemeanor, and in addition to criminal penalty, violation of the ordinance may constitute grounds for forfeiture of office proceedings if brought under the city charter. And I won't go into forfeiture of office, but you're welcome to read that if you want. So, prohibitions, things you cannot do. Cannot accept stacks of cash greater than $50. You actually can't accept anything that is greater than $50. You may not offer, give, solicit any gift, loan, or other thing of value with the understanding that a vote or action will be influenced. So you can't receive anything of value with the understanding. So even if somebody gave Peter, sorry, you put yourself out as a hypothetical earlier. If somebody gives you a $25 gift card to wherever and says, this is so you vote yes, that's a problem, even though it's less than $50, because that is the quid pro quo, this for that. None of that, please. Do not falsely represent your own personal opinions as those of the governmental body of which you are a member. We've talked about this before. We'll talk about it, I'm sure, again. The city council as a whole represents the city of Lansing. You individually do not necessarily represent the city of Lansing. You represent your office, which is an elected position within the city of Lansing. You can say things like, I as a council member support this, I as a council member don't support this, but you as an individual cannot say, I as the city support this, or the whole city supports this, or doesn't support this. You may not act, oh, I just did that one, didn't I? You may not act on behalf of the city when making a policy statement if you do not have authority to do so. You may not divulge confidential information before it is authorized for release. This includes things that come to you confidentially, either in writing or in a closed session. You may not use the power of your office to intimidate or threaten others. I don't know, picture any movie ever with a corrupt politician. Use your position to obtain financial gain for yourself or others to whom you are associated. May not engage in a business transaction that allows you to profit from confidential information. We are fortunate that there's very little insider trading going on among Lansing City Council business, but still, don't be tempted. You may not participate in, vote on, or otherwise act upon a matter if you have a conflict of interest or a financial interest other than as a citizen of the city. And this is what I was talking about, the self-dealing or being on both sides of a transaction. Many members of council are also, you all have employment elsewhere, and or probably sit on other boards of nonprofits and entities like that that may deal with the city because they are in the city. And you have to be careful to disclose any relationships you might have like that. so that you don't indirectly or I guess accidentally benefit one of those entities without disclosing it. And you may not assist or agree to assist directly or indirectly in the violation of this ordinance. So for example, if somebody passes to Adam the $25 gift card and says, hey, get Peter this $25 gift card and tell him to vote yes. Now you're both in trouble. So, next up, what is a gift? A gift is anything of value, given without the expectation of receiving something in return, including free meals, tickets to events, free trips, cash, sweatshirts, hats, anything of the sort. A gift does not include an item that is received from, I'm going to say, family, relative within 5th degree of consanguinity, which is one of those very silly things that we all learn about in law school in property class, and I hope none of you ever have to learn about. But you count degrees of consanguinity with starting at yourself, and then how many squares you have to go through in order to get to that relation. So you'll see the exciting set of circles. Your great-great-grandparents are okay, but your first cousins twice removed are not okay. Sorry. Don't know how many of you have first cousins twice removed. Regardless. Next up. Oh, it's not interactive anymore. It used to be that I would say the thing and then push a button and then the no would appear. But imagine that's happening, please. If the gift value is greater than $50, should you accept the gift? No. If there's understanding that the official action will be influenced? No. If there's even the implication that an official action will be influenced? No. If accepting the gift would cause an appearance of impropriety? No. Exciting question. Does everyone know what the appearance of impropriety is? No. No! That's correct. The appearance of impropriety is any time that a person could suggest to someone else that that wasn't quite proper. It is, of course, legally defined blurrily in many cases. Lawyers love this term, the appearance of impropriety, and judges love it also, and the ordinary person has no idea what it means. But it's one of those things that if something goes down and everybody sort of raises an eyebrow and says, that wasn't quite right, that would probably be subject to an analysis for appearance of impropriety. Hooray! Oh yeah, this one also, the thumbs up are supposed to come eventually, and then the gift plays. But imagine that Heather Sumner is saying this to you in a way that is funny and enjoyable. She does not work here anymore, but she came up with this slide, and it's wonderful. At the end of the day, the following are acceptable. A gift obviously given because of a family or personal relationship, yes, you can accept that gift. Free attendance to a city-sponsored event where lunch or other services may be included, yes, that's okay. The city is sponsoring it for free attendance purposes. Anybody can come. Snacks like pop, coffee, donuts, yes, presuming they're less than $50, and presuming you are not taking like 500 pops or, I don't know, 3 very large things of coffee clearing $50. You get the idea. Items of little inherent value, such as plaques, trophies, yes. Gifts between coworkers and supervisors, yes. A gift you bought yourself, treat yourself. Heather delivered it better than me, I'm not going to try. Conflicts of interest. Promise, I think I'm almost done. Oh, this is the boring stuff. Even more boring, you might ask? Yes. Conflict of interest questions raised by or about a city council member at a city council meeting and relating to an agenda item will be determined by the city council at that meeting. There's a whole protocol involved for this. If and when it comes up, I promise that we will tell you how to do it correctly. It's kind of weird because the person that's getting voted about whether they have a conflict doesn't count towards the vote total, and we always have to make sure that we're counting the votes correctly. But we will cross that bridge if we come to it. Here's how you do it. At least 10 days prior to the first of any of the events set forth below, A, B, C, D, and E, a council member who may derive income or benefit directly or indirectly shall, that means you have to, if you don't, it's a problem, file an affidavit with the city clerk detailing such income and benefit to be derived. So these things are the bidding of a contract. If for example, an entity that you work for or own is bidding on a contract with the city, that would be a thing you have to disclose. The negotiation of such a contract, the solicitation of such a contract, the entry of the contract heavy here, and any city action by which you may derive any income or benefit. So, any contract through which an entity you are involved with may benefit, and that contract is with the city council will be voting on or being involved in, or any city action which you may derive any income or benefit. So this sometimes comes, usually I will use Carol, because this was an Omni every year thing. Carol works for a nonprofit entity that did contracting with the city, received benefit grant funds from the city, and would have to recuse herself from all such votes about any money that could go towards that entity over an abundance of caution. And that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about. If you have any other conflict between a personal interest and the public interest, you shall disclose to the city attorney the nature of the conflict, and you may not vote or otherwise act upon any matter if a conflict exists. Affidavits of disclosure. When should you file an affidavit of disclosure? This is an item that the clerk possesses that you fill out when you have anything to disclose about a private interest or financial interest that you may have. If you, your family, or close associate has a financial interest in a corporation or business that is involved in a city matter, and an organization that you, your family, or close associates are involved with or have prospective employment with is involved in a city matter, you have a position outside the city which may be affected by your position as a council member. You have an interest other than as a citizen of the city that is directly or indirectly involved in a city matter. And when we talk about that, we say everybody, you're all citizens of Lansing, you have a general interest that Lansing do well. You also have a specifically elected interest that Lansing do well, and it's your goal to keep Lansing doing well. But if you have an interest that is separate or beyond or different from that, that's what we're talking about. And then any situation which gives rise to, there it is again, the appearance of, conflict, impropriety, same thing. When in doubt, disclose it. Please be overly cautious about this because the consequence is after you have made the mistake, not after you realize you made the mistake. If it's happened, it's too late. Statements of financial interests, another thing to file. Good news, you always do this at least once a year. Every reporting individual shall file by May 1st a sworn written statement of financial interests unless he or she has already filed a statement in that same calendar year. The statement of financial interest shall contain 1. I'm not going to read all of this to you, except that you are basically describing what it is that is your financial interest, and you disclose all of that and it gets filed with the clerk, I believe. Reporting individual during proceeding year, the name of any person or organization, honorary not in excess of $500. So this is stuff like sources of income, properties you may own above and beyond the one that you live in, anything that generates income that could create a conflict for you later. Statements of financial interest continued. The name and instrument and ownership in any entity conducting business in. So once again, I could read all these words to you, but anything you own that has value, anything that you do that creates value, anything that you do that you get paid value for counts as part of your affidavit of disclosure or statement of financial interests. This includes if you own some kind of index fund or some number of shares in an index fund, we don't really care about that. But if you are, say, a shareholder in some corporation directly, we might care about that. The details of this, if you are interested, always ask your excited, nerdy lawyers about this, or you can read the ethics ordinance or check the affidavit and statement of financial interest with the clerk.
If the business does business with the city, right? Like you're not talking stocks at Apple?
No. So if it does business with the city, yes, that's a specific disclosure. Apple stocks, we're not so much concerned with. But there are some stocks or possible ownership interests that you may have in something that doesn't directly do business with the city of Lansing, but could do business with the city of Lansing. And that would be part of your statement of financial interest that you might disclose. So, like if I owned a rental home in the city of Lansing, I know that's getting inspected, but even if I'm not going to be contracting with the city of Lansing for that, there's the possibility of interfacing with the city in any way. Misuses of positions or power. Do not use your office for the private gain of others, including yourself, your family, or nonprofits. I do want to touch on this briefly because I know that sometimes people think, oh, I sit on this nonprofit board. Nonprofits always do good things, and generally they do good things. But nonprofits are still external entities. They still have external interests in what is going on. It's certainly to the benefit of the city to help some nonprofits, but you cannot use your office specifically for the gain of a nonprofit other than through proper channels. You may not use your office to intimidate or threaten city employees or members of the public to gain personal, financial, or political gain. This is the classic "do you know who I am" kind of things. You may not use your office to obtain preferential treatment. Same. Use your office to imply a quid pro quo situation. Use city property for personal business, including stationery and phones. And you may not leak information to the press or others who are not privy to such information. Again, this kind of goes back to fiduciary obligations for you as the board for the city. If you know something that you know only because you are a council member, it is probably confidential if it was not revealed or a part of a public meeting, and you have an obligation to maintain that confidentiality unless such time as it becomes public. Use of city, no, never mind, covered it. Okay, finally, the smell test. Heather also delivers this one much better than me. Does the situation smell? So imagine I'm saying smell in a very provocative and interesting way. What would this smell like if it was headline news? Will this stink up your reputation? Will this stink up the city or the council's reputation? And will this leave a bad taste in people's mouths? If any of the following apply, don't do it. Or ask, please, first. I will also say, finally, the flip of this is true. If something feels like it's probably okay, it still might not be okay if it involves any of the things that we have talked about. So this goes back to that when I was saying, like, nonprofits are very good, but that doesn't mean that you don't follow the rules with nonprofits. So if it smells cool, it might still run afoul of the requirements in here. So just be aware. And that's it. Any questions?
Any questions? Seeing, I guess I do have one question. We've been using that $50, I think since I started. And I try not to take gifts by any means, but is there a point in time where that changes, or is there?
That's a great question. I will make the observation that if you go into any of our ordinances that set a dollar limit before a certain thing is triggered to happen, and go down and look at the last time that ordinance was amended to make whatever that number is, several of them were set over 25 years ago, and some even longer than that. It is up to the governing body to make an amendments to the ordinance if you wanted to change that to keep with inflation, for example. Because, it hasn't happened for a really long time. You could. I would say that, generally speaking, the threshold of $50 when compared against a lot of like corporate ethics and other government ethics is very low. I don't think it's problematic because I don't think you're all suffering to just wait for that gift that's $60 or something. But that would be definitely something you could look at if you wanted to.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Sure.
On the leak confidential information to the press.
Sure.
You said it could be anything. So, because you skipped confidential initially and then said anything, it could possibly be any communication you may receive. So are we to assume that everything we get is confidential?
I don't think you can assume that anything you get is confidential. It depends on how you get it, which is why I kind of zeroed in on, and again, this is always fairly fact-specific in terms of answering hypotheticals. But that's why I sort of circled back on, if this is something that you know only because you're a council member, if that makes sense, if you only came into this knowledge because you're a council member.
But what if you came into the knowledge was marked share with public?
That would, I mean, this is where we're going down a
Did you have
hypothetical.
something on it? I saw your hands go up. Okay, all right, thank you.
If it says disseminate to the public, then I presume that would be something that could be disseminated with the public, but I wouldn't know unless I saw the full context.
Okay.
None of us could.
I appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah.
I know it specified press, but does it also include social media? We're in that era right now.
Sure, yes. Yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, it's really taking something that is, there's a, well, yeah. If you have come into information that you know only because of your position, and again, this is very much like the sort of corporate standard for these things, and it applies very similarly to the public corporation. We are a public corporation, City of Lansing. If that's how you came into that information, disseminating to the public is the issue. So press, yes. Public media or social media, very public. I mean, you can argue that you have to have an account and all that kind of stuff, but you're functionally, if you put something on Facebook, everybody's seeing it, or could see it. So, yes.
One example, Mr. Cost, is, for example, you get letters from us, say attorney-client privileged, that's confidential. The rest of it, if you're in closed session, there's a reason you're in closed session, discussing litigation, that would be confidential. And you can think of any other examples. What's happening in the dais is not confidential. It's all subject to the Open Meetings Act, and including the cow, anything that's open to the public is not confidential. Email exchanges could or could not be, depending on who's transmitting it, what the subject matter is. If I were to send you an email and didn't say attorney-client privilege, I assessment liability to be $1 million, that would be arguable confidential information to you. Okay? So those are the general principles, and it goes right to the fiduciary duty also. Right. That's an element of fiduciary duty.
But if you have a specific question about releasing information as to whether it may violate this, the city attorney is available to you to help advise you on those issues.
Absolutely.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, not seeing any, I think we can move on.
Oh, sorry. You're so welcome. I was trying to be polite in the other direction.
All right, so I'm going to talk about the Open Meetings Act. The Open Meetings Act is the framework that requires a public body to conduct nearly all of its business in an open meeting, and also prescribes punishments for failure to do so. The Open Meetings Act is a state statute, MCL 15.263 et sec. And it indicates that all meetings of a public body shall be open to the public and shall be held in a place available to the public. So obviously this means that all of your council committee meetings must be open to the public. All decisions that you make must be done at a public meeting. And critically, all deliberations must take place in the public setting. So even if you receive information in a closed session, it's not appropriate to deliberate or vote. The only vote appropriate in a closed session is a motion to rise. Some definitions that you probably are already aware of. Public body, which is legislative or governing body, including a board, commission, committee, subcommittee, authority, or council performing governmental or proprietary function. You, as the Lansing City Council, are a public body. A quorum is the minimum number of members present who must be present for the board to act. For city council, a quorum is 5 members. For a committee, a quorum is 2 members. A meeting is the convening of a public body at which a quorum is present for the purposes of deliberating towards rendering a decision on public policy. So it does not apply to a conference or informational gathering, provided there's no deliberation, and the gathering's not designed to kind of circumvent the Open Meetings Act. But just because you don't call something a meeting doesn't mean it isn't a meeting. It depends on, do you have a quorum present, and are you deliberating on a matter that you need to make a decision on?
Lisa, can I step you for 1 second? So if we're, let's say, just for clarity for the public, if we're at a meeting that may be an outside group, let's say Rejuvenate South Lansing, and there are 5 council members there, is that not considered an open meeting yet because we're not deliberating?
You would just have to be careful that you don't engage in deliberation. So it can be an information sharing where you're sharing information with the public, but you as council members cannot be deliberating with each other. Say there's a project coming up and the developer is presenting at Rejuvenating South Lansing. It can't turn into a deliberation. Rather, it would have to be that informational gathering.
Perfect, thank you.
A decision must be made in public. It's a determination, action, vote, or disposition upon a motion, proposal, recommendation, resolution, order, ordinance, bill, or measure on which a vote by members of the public body is required, and it's your formal action. So the official business of you, the city council, is to make decisions. The OMA contains various notice requirements. A schedule of the regular meetings must be posted within 10 days of the first meeting of the year. You as a body take care of this at the end of the year before you break in December. And then as meetings are needed to change, you amend those via resolution. Again, if there's a change in the schedule, a new schedule must be posted within 3 days of the meeting at which the change was made. If there's a rescheduled or a special meeting that requires 18 hours, must be posted at least 18 hours before the meeting, must be available for the entire period of time. Our recommendation is that the city clerk and council staff post notices of rescheduled or special meetings in the glass of the front door of City Hall so that they're accessible to the public even when the building is closed. Further notices of rescheduled or special meetings should also be posted online, which they always are. Public access to meetings and minutes. The public meeting shall be open to the public and held in a place available to the general public. For committee meetings, that's here in this conference room. For committee of the whole and council meetings, obviously that's council chambers. All persons in attendance have the right to address the public body. The members of the public body, members of the public who are attending the meeting may tape record, videotape, broadcast it live, subject to reasonable rules established by the governing body, which minimize disruption. No person may be excluded from a meeting except for a breach of the peace committed at that meeting from which the person is being excluded. So there's a procedure by which to call somebody out of order and request their removal for that meeting, but they can't be banned indefinitely. It's limited to the meeting at which there is a disruption by that individual. Minutes must be kept of all meetings. They are the public record and must be available for review and copying. This is obviously except for closed sessions. Draft meeting minutes must be available for public inspection within 8 business days of the meeting. Approved minutes must be available within 5 business days after the meeting at which they were approved. If there are corrections that are required, they must be made to the minutes no later than the next meeting after the meeting to which they refer. Corrected minutes must be available not later than the next meeting after the correction and must show both the original entry and the correction. So many of you recall during COVID, there were some changes made to the Open Meetings Act which permitted the public body to meet in an electronic setting. By and large, those exceptions are over and have expired. Only in a situation where a member of the public body is away on military duty may that member be afforded the opportunity to attend the meeting via a virtual forum. If one member is attending virtually due to military duty, there's specific things that need to be noticed on the meeting agenda and needed to be indicated by that member. We can obviously go through that should that situation arise, which I don't think applies at least this year, but. One question that we've gotten on a semi-frequent basis is whether members of the public are allowed to attend and participate in meetings virtually. So I think it's important to note that the Open Meetings Act only applies to members of the public body, not members of the public. So if the council chooses, accommodations could be made for those members of the public body of the public who wish to attend remotely. Council does not have to provide for virtual attendance of members of the public. If they do, a physical location must still be provided. And if a remote option is provided for public, there must be technology in place that allows those individuals to address the body and see and hear all members of the public body during the course of the meeting. In the past, there's been some potential rule changes, so if this comes up again, we can certainly address any questions as they may arise. As I indicated at the beginning of my presentation, there are some exceptions to this open meeting requirement, which is meeting in closed sessions. There are 6 exceptions listed in the Open Meetings Act which permit a public body to meet in a closed session. Those are personnel matters if requested by that personnel member, collective bargaining if requested by either negotiating party, purchase or lease of real estate up to the time an option to purchase or lease of that property is obtained, attorney consultation in connection with specific pending litigation. We do litigation updates on a quarterly basis should the need arise to have a special closed session for a specific litigation. We can do that as long as it's noticed properly and appropriate motions are made and the vote to go into closed session. You could also go into closed session to review applications for employment, but critically, the interviews themselves must be held in an open meeting. And you could also go into closed session for consideration of material exempt from discussion or disclosure by state or federal statute. This would include written opinions from the city attorney. The easiest way to avoid violating the Open Meetings Act is to conduct all business in an open session. However, there are some situations that I've just explained that it would not be appropriate to do so. So when we think about things like emailing, texting, tweeting, posting, liking, poking, I don't know if that's a thing anymore. Oh, you don't have Facebook. Commenting, etc. So the Open Meetings Act prohibits voting by secret ballots because it essentially closes part of the meeting to the public. Round robin voting is also prohibited. Intentionally communicating in groups just smaller than a quorum and then having those groups speak to each other is also prohibited. Private communication between members during a public meeting about matters before the body is also prohibited. This does include note passing, texting, stepping away from the dais, whispering to your neighbor about matters that you're deliberating on is not appropriate. There is a real-life case here where commissioners use email to discuss, deliberate, and determine how to address commission matters, and then they would carry out those decisions at public meetings. The commissioners, even the ones that did not affirmatively reply to the email, were found to have violated the Open Meetings Act. It's important to note that the court concluded that each email was a private meeting that deliberated a matter of public policy and should have been in an open session. The Commission's legal counsel advised against emailing a quorum of the commissioners, and they did so anyway. So just kind of be cognizant when you're emailing each other, whether there's a quorum and whether you are deliberating or reaching decisions. If that's happening, it needs to be done in open session.
So Lisa, so if Just real quick, so if, let's say there was that going on, and one person wasn't responding to the emails, even though they weren't responding,
They're still violating the Open Meetings Act because they're included on the communication.
okay, so what would you do, what would you, so let's say someone did include you on an email, you obviously knew it was wrong, should that person contact OCA?
Generally, yes, I would advise an individual reply to the email, not a reply all, indicating that you believe this may be a violation of the Open Meetings Act and that you'll be, approaching the city attorney about it and bring it to us.
Okay.
We're happy to take a look. Just a general warning that any cell phone use while at the dais could be subject to FOIA requests, which will be another topic that we address tonight, but keep in mind that your cell phone communication while you're conducting business during an open meeting could be subject to FOIA. Violations of the Open Meetings Act. There is a civil action that could be brought to invalidate any of the decisions that were made in violation of the Act, or to compel compliance with the Open Meetings Act. A person bringing that civil action may be entitled to court costs and attorney's fees. And a public official who intentionally violates the Open Meetings Act is guilty of a misdemeanor punishable by a fine up to $1,000 and is personally liable in a civil action for actual and punitive damages up to $500 plus court costs and attorney's fees. Are there questions on the Open Meetings Act?
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Lisa.
Everybody not glazed over yet? Okay. Human rights, principles and values. This is something that's near and dear to my heart. After 30 years of prosecuting and now 8 years defending the city from these claims. It's a significant area of the law, and it probably results in the #1 reason why municipalities are sued. That's under 1983, but I'm jumping ahead a little bit, so let me start with the first slide. Human rights framework. There are several types of what we call, or are designated as human rights. There's the universal, all of us have them, and they apply everywhere. Inalienable, which is the key buzzword in the United States. We are born with them. They aren't granted to us by a government. Indivisible. The realization of human rights depends on the protection and fulfillment of all rights. Interdependent. They depend on each other to be fully realized. The role of policymakers is to respect those rights. The government can't take them away or stop you from enjoying them. To protect those rights, the government must prevent others, individuals or corporations, from violating those rights. And fulfill. You must take positive actions to contribute to the enjoyment of basic human rights. Here we go to section 1983 of the 42 U.S. Code, and that's the deprivation of rights. And it states, every person who, under color of any statute, ordinance, regulation, custom, or usage of any state, subjects or causes to be subjected any citizen of the United States or other person within the jurisdiction thereof to the deprivation of any rights, privileges, or immunities secured by the Constitution and laws shall be liable to the party injured in an action at law. And this is the most common federal litigation filed against municipalities. It's what we call municipal liability. Now, we have a Michigan Department of Civil Rights. It investigates. There's resolves discrimination complaints and works to prevent discrimination through educational programs and promote voluntary compliance with the civil rights laws. The Office of the City Attorney responds to MDCR complaints made against the city, city departments, and/or city employees. And we provide you a link that gives you more in-depth information on what the MDCR does. The law the MDCR enforces is the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act. They also work in conjunction with the EEOC, which is the federal arm of our civil rights enforcement and protection investigation. In the city of Lansing, we also have a human rights ordinance. I know you're getting a headache. I'm not going to read you this. But this is our human rights ordinance. And you saw earlier when HR put up the blurb, the PowerPoint on what the categories of invidious discrimination involved. Race, color, religion, national origin, sex, age, height, weight, marital status, physical or mental disability, family status, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, HIV status, source of income, ancestry, student status, housing status, political affiliation or belief, or service in armed forces in sovereign nations. So we go a little bit beyond the state and the feds with our human rights ordinance. Unfortunately, the consequence of our human rights ordinance is only a civil infraction. And I would say it's 150 for the first offense, 250 for the second offense. That's a nominal infraction. It has to be brought within 180 days. That is the same time frame reserved for filing a complaint with the MDCR. Any complaint with the MDCR, the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, has to be filed within 180 days. So we should not be encouraging people to file a city of Lansing human rights only. We should not, I always recommended in private practice that if somebody had a civil rights complaint, that they go down to the Michigan Department of Civil Rights and file that complaint. I think we have that obligation as citizens. They keep track of those numbers. They keep track of those complaints. They monitor those metrics. And it's important for the state to have a full view of what is going on in our society and culture and be able to monitor those things. So, and that's what we try to do here within the city. So, there are a couple of types of harassment within the employment that we have typically focused in on in civil rights or human rights. And those types of sexual harassment are quid pro quo and hostile work environment. Now, hostile work environment is not just a sexual harassment area. There are also other areas, bases upon which a hostile work environment can be predicated. And you saw that in the video that HR presented. It can be based upon race, it can be based upon age. Matter of fact, I was getting upset watching that video, the way they were treating those older gentlemen, but in any event.
Anyone over 40, right? Yeah.
That's actually true. Anybody over 40.
That's why I defended myself.
And quid pro quo has already been defined. That's where you're asking for something, you'll give something if you get something. And we don't want to engage in that. And we have strong policies in this city, but policies are only as good as they are applied. And so it's important for us to know the policies, but also to apply them appropriately. Hostile work environment. Now, this is going to focus on the sexuality of another person or occurs because of the person's gender. And that's not the only basis. We're not limited to that. But generally, it is unwanted or unwelcome behavior. And it's severe or pervasive enough to interfere or affect the person's work environment and their performance. And there are all kinds of costs when we deny our resources, our employees, the ability to work without harassment. We need to have a productive, resourceful work environment for all of our employees. And then we talked to cost of the city, but the most important thing for council with human rights that I want you to focus in on is that we have two processes here. One is for our employees, what I call within the building, although our employees are broader based than just this building. But when our employees, if there is a civil rights complaint, that needs to go directly to HR as fast as we can get it there. We don't want to conduct our own investigations. We don't want to try and find out what the issues are and have our own meetings. That makes us witnesses. That actually pollutes the process. We have strict guidelines and timelines from which HR on our collective bargaining agreements from which to perform the mandatory things that we have to do. So if you become aware of a civil rights complaint, it's got to go from within the building, from within our employment status. It has to go to HR immediately. The second one is if you become aware of a civil rights complaint from outside the building, something in a business, a local business, or an accommodation, and the complaint comes from outside the city apparatus. Those complaints have to go immediately to, I want to say human, but it's Human Relations and Community Services. They handle all the complaints from outside of our city structure. And by city structure, I mean our employment structure. So HR for employees, outside external complaints and civil rights go to Human Relations and Community Services, and they need to go to them directly. And the less involvement before you get them to them, the better off you are, because you'll save yourself some testimony, and you can't be accused of polluting the process, which we have to adhere to. And these are serious issues for the people involved, so they shouldn't be taken lightly, and they shouldn't be just delayed or obfuscated, or we don't want to hurt the football programs. Let's not relate let's keep it buried up. No, that's how things get bad results.
Excuse me. We recently had a group who went and had a civil rights complaint and then went to HRCS, and now they forwarded me information, and I spoke with the president on that. So I followed up with them to see if they got resolved, but they were complaining about that process. So what will we do next?
Well, it depends on what the complaints are and who they are against, what the types of complaints. I mean, there's a lot of hypotheticals we can go into, and I don't want to talk about a specific situation involving the city, but that's something we'd be happy to take up online. I'm very concerned that if there is something that is not following our processes or applying our policies appropriately, we can have the greatest policies in the world. If we don't apply them appropriately, that's an issue. So if there is a case like that, that's something the city attorney would be interested in, and we counsel these departments. So we would want to make sure that these things are processed appropriately, our policies are applied appropriately, and that everybody who has a complaint is heard appropriately.
So we would forward that information to your office?
Depending upon what it is, and I can go offline with you on this, but yes, it should come to our office, but it should go to HRCS, if that's the department you're talking about, and they may have an explanation for it. If they don't, then you could further that to the city attorney's office.
So what they've said is they had a civil rights complaint. I don't have the details. They said they were supposed to go to HRCS, and they were concerned with the way that they're handling it. So then you're saying to forward that to the city attorney's office?
Well, I don't know. I mean, there's no specifics there for me to indicate whether or not what they did was appropriate or not. Just because somebody doesn't like the answer they get doesn't necessarily mean that their complaint was handled.
No, I understand that. I'm saying based on what you just said is that you want to make sure things are handled quickly and have less, interaction if it's a concern like that. So I'm saying if you have an individual or person who is complaining or concerned about the HRCS based on them filing a civil rights complaint, what was our next step? That's what I'm asking you.
Well, when you say are you talking about counsel or the person who's making the complaint?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. What can you do to prevent sexual harassment? You have to make immediate and corrective action. And if it is within the city, you send it to HR. If it's from outside the city, you send it to Human Relations and Community Services. Document the contact and what you did with it, and communicate the action to the affected employee. I have referred you to HR, or I have referred you to HRCS. And then explain what he or she should do if the problem should occur. So if you can have a continuing problem, you have to take that complaint to HRCS or to HR. Anybody who sits on their hands, sits on their rights, and does not exhaust their administrative remedies, that's an issue. So we want to make sure that if there's a complaint, we react to it, that we act on it, we do it immediately, and that we follow our policies and procedures. Those are the best protections against municipal liability for the city. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now for the portion I'm sure everyone has been waiting with bated breath for, FOIA requests.
Nothing special about those, right?
I'm sorry?
There's a special ingredient, but it's not sold in the city.
Okay. Gotta be clear on that.
It's not regular.
So an introduction. FOIA request is a request for an existing public record possessed by a public body. What is a public record? Any writing prepared, used, or possessed by a public body in performance of an official function. This includes writings, letters, emails, pictures, text messages, maps, audio recordings, video, you name it. This is an important point. Use of a personal cell phone or email for work purposes may subject that information to public disclosure. So be careful with those things and use common sense. What is not a public record? Software and personal notes that are not made part of a public record. So, your little Post-it notes and doodles and stuff that you write up, ball up, and throw away, that's fine. Those are not public records. So, what do you do if you get a request for public records? Oh yeah. Public body is not required to create a public record nor to make a compilation or summary. That means if someone makes a request for something, that thing has to exist in the form they're asking for it. We don't have to compile new things, create new reports, any of that type of stuff. So what do you do if you get a request for public records? Send it to the Office of the City Attorney ASAP, even if it does not specifically reference FOIA. If they're looking for records from the city, from a public body, that is a FOIA request. You can send it to the FOIA email. The link is on there. If for some reason we get a request, you get a request, someone gets a request that gets sent to a spam or a junk folder, a FOIA there's case on this. The FOIA is considered received on the date that it is discovered. So if it does for some reason find its way into some weird folder somewhere, it's received when we actually find it. So what do we do with that request? We request the pertinent portions of the request in a city log, which is posted on the city's website each month. Our office will reach out to the relevant departments to see if they have responsive records. The types of departments that get FOIA'd most often, the big one is property requests. That's where we see the bulk of these. So building safety office, the fire department, the city assessor, for things like building records, assessing cards, hazardous storage, all that kind of stuff. Essentially the things that people do when they're doing due diligence for the acquisition of real estate, especially commercial real estate. The clerk's office for any sort of things like records on file, for stuff related to marijuana. And then the other real big one is LPD for police reports, arrest records, procedure documents, all that good stuff. So, cost estimates. A public body may charge for a request if the request takes more than 15 minutes to process, or if the document requested already has an associated price to obtain it. For example, a fire inspector report. The calculation of that cost is the time multiplied by the hourly rate of the lowest paid capable employee. Other costs can include copying costs, mailing costs, costs of physical media like CDs or USB drives if someone is asking for information in a physical format that we have to produce and send out. We try to send it out digitally, but some people like their good old-fashioned physical stuff. And then redaction time is another big one. So for big FOIAs, there's good faith deposit. And that's if a department estimates that a FOIA will take more than $50 to process, we send that requester a good faith deposit request. That deposit's half of the estimated total cost. We don't begin processing that request until we receive that deposit. The other half of the costs, in addition to any additional costs, are due upon production of the FOIA. So, we get documents back, right? I said we send out the request. We send out requests to any relevant department that we say, hey, you might have records. They look around and they get those documents back to us, preferably within 5 business days. If they, for some reason, know that it's going to take more time, they should let us know. We can request a 10-day extension. If the documents include information exempt from FOIA, our office does the redacting. Please do not redact any information prior to providing it to the Office of the City Attorney. If you have any concerns about information contained in the records, reach out to us and let us know. So some common exemptions and redactions: attorney-client privilege, police investigation records, medical information, frank communications, bids for contract with the city during open bidding, and then statutory exemptions. And these are the only required redactions. And that is if Michigan has passed a statute saying you will not release this information. So FOIA appeals. Any request that is denied in whole or in part may appeal to the President of City Council. And then our office, OCA, will provide a summary of the basis for the denial to the President. If they are still not happy with that decision, they can file an action in circuit court. And I believe that's it for FOIA. So any FOIA questions?
Submit them in writing.
We do maintain a FOIA log, so you can see what FOIA traffic we've had.
You send that to us, right? Yeah.
I send that out monthly.
All right. That's it. Yeah, but I have the next one too.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. So, me again. Officers and elections. Qualifications for elective office. All of you, I'm assuming, know these and have met them, but every city official holding elective office shall be a registered elector in the city of Lansing and shall have been a resident of the city for 1 year prior to taking office. A ward council member shall be a resident of the ward from which they are elected or chosen. And then some ineligibility items. Any person who has been convicted of either a violation of the election laws of the city, the state, or the United States, or a violation of the public trust, or any felony shall not be eligible to hold any city office for a period of 20 years from the date of conviction. No person who is in default to the city shall be eligible to hold any city office. And a person who has or who holds or has held any elective city office shall not be eligible for appointment to a non-elective office or employment for which compensation is paid by or through any agency of the city until the person has been out of office for at least 1 year. And now there is an eligibility affidavit, and city council rules provide per Rule 47 the verification of qualifications for elective office. Upon first taking office and annually, not later than May 1 of each year, each member must submit an affidavit to the city clerk that the provisions of the Lansing City Charter 2102 continue to be met. In addition, the affidavit must also include a statement that each member of council has no circumstance should render that member ineligible for elective office pursuant to City Charter 2103. The city clerk shall notify council leadership, council president, and vice president if any member of city council fails to submit the required affidavit by the deadline, or if a member of council is ineligible for office pursuant to the charter. And now some election do's and don'ts. None of you guys are up for election this year, but there is a local election now that we have the Charter Commission election. So just some important notes. City officials may use their title for identification purposes and endorsements, supporting or opposing a candidate or initiative or a referendum, but should not use public facilities or equipment for communications and should make it clear that that is their own personal view. Do not donate to a candidate as a public official or public body using public funds. You are, of course, allowed to make private donations. Do not display any campaign materials in City Hall, but you may do so at your own private residence. Do not use social media accounts created for official public office to endorse a candidate. Again, you may do so on your own personal social media account. In the Michigan Campaign Finance Act, the Campaign Finance Act prohibits public bodies from using funds, personnel, office space, computer hardware or software, property, stationery, postage, vehicles, equipment, supplies, or any other public resource to make a contribution or expenditure or provide volunteer personal services. A violation of the Michigan Campaign Finance Act is a misdemeanor, punishable by up to a $1,000 fine and a year in jail. Contribution is defined as a payment, gift, subscription, assessment, expenditure, contract, payment for services, dues, advance, forbearance, loan, or donation of money or anything of ascertainable monetary value to a person made for the purpose of influencing the nomination or election of a candidate, for the qualification, passage, or defeat of a ballot question, or for the qualification of a new political party. And then an expenditure is defined as a payment, donation, loan, or promise of payment of money or anything of ascertainable monetary value for goods, materials, services, or facilities in assistance of or in opposition to the nomination or election of a candidate, the qualification, passage, or defeat of a ballot question, or the qualification of a new political party. So what you can and cannot do under the Campaign Finance Act. The following are all allowed. An expenditure for communication on a subject or issue if the communication does not support or oppose a ballot question or candidate by name or clear inference. The expression of views by an elected or appointed official who has policy-making responsibilities. Again, this is important to relate back to what Greg said earlier. This is where you can say, I, as a council member, think this, or like this person, dislike that person, but not city council likes or dislikes that person, because then you would be speaking on behalf of the body and not yourself as an individual. The production or dissemination of factual information concerning issues relevant to the function of the public body. The production or dissemination of debates, interviews, commentary, or information by a broadcasting station, newspaper, magazine, or other periodical or publication in the regular course of broadcasting or publication. The use of a public facility owned or leased by or on behalf of a public body if any candidate or committee has an equal opportunity to use that facility. An elected or appointed public official or an employee of a public body who, when not acting for a public body but on his or her personal time, expresses his or her own personal views, expends his or her own personal views, provides his or her own personal volunteer services. Payroll deduction plans are expressly not allowed under the Campaign Finance Act. A knowing violation of this prohibition, again, is a misdemeanor, punishable by a fine of up to $1,000 or imprisonment up to 1 year or both. And then persons other than individuals, such as the city, may be fined up to $20,000 or the amount of the prohibited contribution or expenditure, whichever is greater. So now we have the penultimate prohibitions. Contributions. It's very important that there is no intermingling of public offense funds and campaign contributions. Do not use city equipment, personnel, or supplies for anything campaign related. This can be easy to do if you're at City Hall and something comes up. So remember, pay attention to using phones, emails, those type of things. Do not put campaign signs in the public right of way. Do not place campaign literature in mailboxes or staple them to utility poles or trees. Follow the rules for candidate filing and reporting. If there are any questions, have your treasurer or committee chair obtain clarification from the city clerk and the Ingham County clerk. And beware of accepting contributions from corporations or businesses and any other potential for conflicts of interest in your capacity as a council person. And that is that. Any questions?
I got a question. Who's responsible for removing any literature that's stapled to utility poles?
In our right of way?
In our right of way.
Anyone. It's against, nobody's allowed to put them in our right of way, so if you see something in the right of way that's.
Yeah, but what if one of the council members doesn't feel, comfortable removing stuff like that?
Public service.
Call public service.
Yeah, well, you have the right to do it, as Joe says.
Let me know where it is, I'll take it.
I think the question they're answering is you're not stealing it if you take it down. And
Correct.
You're asking
But
what
still,
city agency can
yes,
do it.
that
Yeah.
could be offensive to some person,
Sure.
Well, Mr. President, members of council, that concludes our presentation. I'll have you know that we update this and look at the current law as it is each year as we get ready for this presentation. Take these with you. There's a lot to absorb, and I'm sure you're probably gonna stay awake all night tonight going over it again.
No deliberating about it, right?
If you have any questions on any of the areas, you want to get a hold of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, any further questions for the office of the city attorney? All right, seeing none, we are to council internal auditor presentation. Emily?
Yeah.
What were you showing me? Were you just?
Yeah, good to see you.
I responded. I knew it was you. And then I saw your license plate.
Oh.
And I wasn't sure.
We don't know.
Hi, everyone. This will be pretty quick, but council leadership asked me to go over with you all kind of what my role is, how we can all work together, and how you guys can best utilize me. So, getting started, I just wanted to start with I work for all of you guys, so you should always feel comfortable reaching out to me about anything that you think I might be able to help with, and I'll let you know right away. So. Just putting that out there first. So per the charter, what it states the internal auditor does is the internal auditor shall devote full time to the services of the city and shall assist the city council in evaluating the planning and budgeting affairs of the city in order to develop and maintain unified city policies. The internal auditor shall make audits of financial transactions of all city agencies at least once every year or as otherwise directed by the city council. As soon as possible after the close of each fiscal year, the internal auditor shall provide an analysis of the financial position of the city. This report shall be public record. The internal auditor shall review the administration and performance of any city agency and report findings and recommendations to the city council and file a copy with the mayor and the clerk. Whenever appropriate, the internal auditor shall promptly make a report to the city council on city agencies or any irregularities of practice or erroneous accounting methods with recommendations for improving the accounting procedures and systems of the agency. A copy of each report on irregularities and bad accounting methods shall be referred to the mayor. And then also the internal auditor shall evaluate the capital improvement plan. So that's kind of what's laid out in the charter of what my job is. So besides this, kind of what I am trying to do personally is 1 to 2 large-scale audits every year of different departments or agencies that I work with council leadership on, and then on top of that, any smaller form audits. So if there's anything you see or hear from the public that might be a little suspicious or you just wanted to look into, those kind of smaller scale audits are sprinkled throughout the year as well. So this kind of breaks down the overall duties in ways that's, I think, a little less confusing than the charter. So the charter basically gives me the duty to do all of this. So verify the existence and assets and recommend proper safeguards for their protection, evaluate the adequacy of the system of internal controls. So that's a big one. I'm not just auditing financial transactions, although that's a huge part of it. I'm also, auditing internal controls, making sure that there's safeguards in place, and then recommending improvements in controls if necessary. Assess compliance with policies and procedures and sound business practices. Like we heard from law, policies and procedures are only as good as if we're following them, so that's another big part of my job. Assess compliance with state and federal laws and contractual obligations, make sure that we're not just following city ordinances, we're following all laws that are necessary. Obviously OCA does a great job with that too, but it is part of the overall duties here. And then review operations programs to ascertain whether results are consistent with established objectives and whether the operations and programs are being carried out as planned. So if you're trying to do X, is the policy and the program we have set up actually achieving X? So that's something I can look at as well. And then investigate reporting occurrences of fraud, embezzlement, theft, and waste. And that's kind of the big one everyone thinks of when they think of an internal auditor, so that definitely is part of it as well. So a big one that's coming up soon is budget involvement. So I put this here as kind of a way in which I think we'll all work together a lot over the next couple of months. So I'll work with you guys on council budget priorities and would love to meet with you individually about kind of what your priorities are, how we can work together for the budget cycle to make sure it runs as smoothly as possible. So I spent a lot of time reviewing the budget that we'll get from the administration in March and kind of figuring out how to disseminate that information to you all. Obviously you'll get the budget as well, but kind of my goal is to go over it on a very high detail accounting level and then give you guys kind of a big picture of what we're looking at. I also am involved with the questioning of departments during the budget cycle, and then I like to say that part of my involvement is to ensure that the budget plans for the future as well. Like you might hear big words like structural deficit and kind of these big finance related terms, and part of my job is making sure that the budget we have will have a long lasting legacy for the city. So really excited to work with you all on budget, and feel free to reach out anytime if you have questions about it, but that's a big part of my job. Another kind of smaller part of my job that I wanted to point out is I do put together council expense reports once a month. So those are typically compiled between the end of the first week of the month or the second week of the month, depending on the timing. So the receipts will close at the end of January, for instance, and then about a week later or so, I will get all of the receipts and everything and we'll compile. So you'll receive a February council expense report that will show your expenses through January. So that will include your individual council account and how much money you have left to spend, as well as all of the accounts within the council budget. So community funding, things like that as well. And then also, although you'll be getting this report monthly, if you have questions about how much you have in your account at any given moment, feel free to send me questions about that as well, and I can always look into it for you. Other responsibilities. One thing not on here that I want to make sure I mention that I forgot to put on here is that I do sit on the Claims Review Committee on behalf of council, so that's a big part of my job. Roughly once every 2 months, myself and representatives from the mayor's office and OCA gather to hear claims from the public about code compliance issues and things like that, and then we deliberate, come up with a response and send it to the citizen. The citizen can then appeal it to a council committee, so I'll come to council committee and kind of explain why the claims review decision made the decision they made. Besides working on new audits, a big part of my job is following up on past audits, because audits often include recommendations or follow-up that's necessary to make sure that changes are being taken into account. I also sit on the LEPFA board as a non-voting member, so I go to that and provide leadership with updates about how LEPFA is doing. I'm really looking at that from mostly a financial lens, but some other lenses as well. So if you ever have questions about LETFA, I'm a good resource for that as well. The HRCS Advisory Board. So from the ordinance, all applications shall be evaluated and ranked by the HRCS Advisory Board, with a minimum acceptable level first being established. The city's internal auditor shall participate as an advisor during the evaluation and ranking process. So that's something that I'm doing right now. We had our first meeting about a week and a half ago to go over processes, and that's kind of in the process right now. So if people have any questions about that, I'm always happy to answer them too. But that is written as an ordinance as part of my job. So how we can work together, it's definitely not just this list, but some things that we can work together on are budget priorities or questions about the budget, constituent concerns, specifically last year, for instance, if there were issues in treasury or things that had a big finance lens to them. Other constituent concerns maybe, but that was a big one if people had questions about their taxes or stuff like that. I'm a good resource for that. Any sort of data analysis questions, total data nerd, I love doing data analysis, so anything like that I can help out with. And then any kind of general research or information gathering questions you guys have. I know you all have full-time jobs, and it's my full-time job to help you guys out. So if there's anything that would be helpful for me to do research on or data analysis on, feel free to let me know. And I'm happy to answer any questions or anytime, not just now. So.
Anybody have any questions for Emily? All right. Well, thanks for your presentation tonight, Emily. And seeing no further business, we're adjourned.
Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Emily.